Donald Trump's most recent Fox News interview is a case study in derangement and delusion, even by Trump standards. Not only does he continue to pretend that he won the 2020 election, with the Fox host in question laughing along at his claims, even though her network had to pay nearly $1 billion because they signal boosted Trump's 2020 election lies, but you also have Trump ranting at length over his frustration that he can't politically target politicians he doesn't like because President Biden pardoned them, saying that before the pardons, they were dead. Yikes. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to play here. We're actually going to start with the most deranged and unsettling of them, which is Trump ranting that he feels that he can't go after his political opponents, or at least some of them, the way he'd like because of President Biden's pardons.
The unselect committee of political thugs, these horrible people, Democrats and two of the worst Republicans in history, crying Adam and Liz Cheney, two of the worst. They are just sick people. This was the committee. And it went for a year and a half. At the end of a year and a half, what did they do? They destroyed every piece of evidence they had because it came out totally on our side. Nancy Pelosi was responsible for the security. She knew that. She proclaimed it on her daughter's tape. I mean, her daughter's a videographer or whatever the hell she does. And she had Nancy.
So real quick, so Trump is a videographer. And he's, of course, lying. Nancy Pelosi was not responsible for the security in the sense of the National Guard. Trump has been proclaiming, I had nothing to do with security. I couldn't have deployed the National Guard. Nancy Pelosi stopped me. Then Speaker Pelosi had no authority over the National Guard. The only person who has authority over the National Guard, or rather the ultimate authority, is the sitting president. At that time, it was Donald Trump. So if Trump wanted to deploy the National Guard to quell the insurrection and Nancy Pelosi told him no, Trump could have given her the finger and done it anyway because she is not in the chain of command. But that's Trump trying to avoid accountability for what happened on January 6th. And Rachel Campos Duffy, the Fox host in question, is just nodding and laughing along, even though it's not true. We'll continue.
He complained, saying that she was responsible for it.
Yeah.
They burned everything. And then Biden gave them all a pardon. These are Congress people. These are people that are in Congress, not respected members of, but they're in Congress.
Yeah.
If you did that in a civil thing,
I know.
But think of it. They burned, deleted, and destroyed every single document after a year and a half because, like the person that said, I grabbed this massive Secret Service agent around the neck and I was rebuffed. And then I went to the other one. And I think he was like this big karate guy. And I went over there. And I had friends that say, don't have it changed. It's so cool. I said, no. I just want the truth.
That's right.
But they burned all that information.
They did not burn all that information. All of the evidence compiled has been digitized. It was publicly available. I believe the Republicans took down the long-standing January 6th Select Committee website, but it was all publicly available. There are digital copies of it everywhere. Donald Trump is just objectively, flatly, 100% lying about this, knowing that Rachel Campos Duffy will not give him any pushback because she's a loser.
And I think she recanted, I've heard, she recanted her. After 2 years, she said, no, it didn't happen. Isn't it a shame, though, huh? Isn't it a shame? I view that as being so egregious. And then what did Biden do? I don't know, him or the auto pen. Whoever operated the auto pen was really the president, because I don't know. But Biden gave them all their freedom because they were dead. I mean, they literally, and you know how they announced it? It was like a little sentence in a document that nobody saw but me and a couple of others. It said, for the sake of clarity, we have decided to destroy all documents, destroy and delete all documents having to do. So they worked for a year and a half, making every.
It is unbelievable. It is unbelievable. But again, see how he's so incoherent. Listen to what he said, though. He said that President Biden pardoned them, which is true. He pardoned the January 6th Select Committee. And Trump says they were dead. Had they not been pardoned by President Biden, Donald Trump is saying that they were dead, that he would have pursued them. Now, are we supposed to take that literally or metaphorically? I think there's no reason to give Trump the benefit of the doubt in this respect. None. There's every reason to not to. So is it flowery language? It doesn't matter. It's irresponsible rhetoric coming from a very authoritarian man. He's clearly upset that President Biden has potentially undermined his efforts to punish Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, and the Democratic members of the bipartisan January 6th Select Committee. Again, using the phrase, they're dead. Very, very unsettling, unhinged stuff from a profoundly, profoundly twisted person. So again, that's very, very deranged. I want to play another clip here. I mentioned derangement. This is the delusion part. Okay, so Trump's still insisting that he won the 2020 election when he didn't. And again, equally of note is Rachel Campos Duffy's response and lack thereof with respect to a fact check.
Now, the one good thing is that this term, I call it the third term, right? I just don't want the results of the second term.
Yeah.
But we won it 3 times, but I don't want the results because it was terrible. What they've done to the border, when you think of it, what they've done to this country with the wars, Russia, Ukraine would have never happened. October 7th in Israel would have never happened. Therefore, you wouldn't have hostages to worry about. You wouldn't have had anything because Iran was broke. They had no money. They couldn't give it to Hamas or Hezbollah. But that would have never happened. The Russia-Ukraine would have never happened. The worst embarrassment in the history of our country, I believe, the Afghanistan withdrawal, the way we withdrew. I think it was the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. Wouldn't have happened. You wouldn't have inflation. And I could name about 25 other things, but you don't have the time, especially in 2 languages.
Yes.
But it's so horrible what took place. And some people don't want to mention it. But you know the other thing? The Democrats keep talking the same way they did. They still want to have men and women's sports. I was watching a news program.
So again, very incoherent. But there he said he insists that he won 3 times. He didn't. He won in 2016 and he won in 2024. And by the way, you don't hear any Democrats or any Democrats of note contesting the election. President Biden committed to a peaceful transfer of power. Vice President Harris called and privately conceded to Trump and then publicly conceded to him the way the Secretary Hillary Clinton did. He is the anomaly here. He is the one who resists and rejects the outcomes of free and fair elections. But setting aside the fact that, I mean, we'll get into some of his constituent claims, but again, note how, Rachel Campos Duffy, she's part of a network that in 2022, 2023 had to pay $787 million to Dominion Voting Systems because they signal boosted Trump's defamatory 2020 election lies. The documents and the information which were released during discovery that Fox News personalities and producers and key figures both on and off camera were aware that the conspiracy theories they were signal boosting were indeed just that, but they were afraid of losing viewer share to Newsmax and OAN, so they propped this shit up. The fact that despite the robust First Amendment protections we have in this country, that Fox News felt the need to settle for nearly $1 billion to Dominion Voting Systems is just absolutely damning of the network's credibility. And here, 2 or 3 years later, you have a Fox News host not bothering to fact check Trump. Like there was no lesson learned there. A responsible journalist would have said, Mr. President, you lost the 2020 election. I know you don't want to relitigate it there, but for both the integrity of this network and other things, we just have to say that for the record and then continue. She wouldn't do that because she's a MAGA coward and a lunatic. Now, as far as the other claims that Donald Trump was making, note that he has no solutions. He's just saying, well, had I been president, had I won the election, that would have never happened. Okay, that's counterfactual. We have no reason to believe that's true. Even if it is true, it did happen. You inherited some of these situations. What are you going to do about it? You promised that you would snap your fingers and resolve the Ukraine-Russia war in 24 hours. You failed spectacularly. You say inflation wasn't on your watch. Well, the COVID pandemic triggered inflation nationwide, globally, really, and you were a major contributor to that. So there's no telling. There's no evidence whatsoever that had you won the 2020 re-election bid, that inflation would have not continued, because it happened everywhere across the planet, even under conservative governance in other countries like the United Kingdom. Afghanistan, we've discussed that quite a bit on this channel. Donald Trump was the one who created the Doha Agreement with the Taliban. He made a deal with the terrorist organization, the Taliban, cut out from negotiations our Afghan allies, similar to how he wants to work with Putin, right? He wants to deal directly with Putin, sideline Zelensky. Trump did that with the Taliban in 2020, the Doha Agreement. He created the deal. He did not enforce the terms of the deal in terms of what they demanded of the Taliban. Trump didn't enforce it. He didn't say, hey, we agreed to this, Taliban, you need to do it. He let the Taliban run roughshod over him. Meanwhile, he honored all of his commitments to the Taliban, including pressuring the Afghan government to release 5,000 Taliban killers and prisoners back into the Taliban. Donald Trump empowered, boldened, recruited for the Taliban, gave them back forces. Meanwhile, Trump continued to withdraw U.S. forces and personnel, even as he failed to enforce the terms. So my point is, he created the circumstances. He left President Biden holding the bag. Like, what are you going to do? Reinvade Afghanistan? Are you going to surge thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of troops back to Afghanistan to clean up Trump's mess? You can criticize the Biden administration for various aspects of the withdrawal if you want to, but Donald Trump was the one who created those circumstances by failing to enforce a deal, and quite frankly, failing to create a good deal in the first place. He did not enforce a bad deal, which made a bad deal even worse. This is objectively true. And Trump had 4 years to get us out of Afghanistan. He refused. And I'll also point out, because people like to say, well, 13 service people died in Afghanistan under President Biden. That's true. And Biden was in charge, so you can blame him for that. He had command responsibility. But more than 40 U.S. troops died in Afghanistan under Donald Trump, which means he was responsible for that as well. And because if we're evaluating the metric of, blaming people, blaming commanders for deaths, perfectly fair. But by that metric, Donald Trump is objectively worse. So again, this interview, deranged and deluded even by Trump standards. He's salivating over the prospect of going after his political opponents. He's upset that President Biden has preemptively pardoned people that he wanted to target. He says they were dead. He was going to target them. They were dead. Incredibly terrifying. And no pushback at all from a Fox News host. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.